Human action. That behavior a conscious man has that is purposeful. We act all the time, from making coffee in the morning to clocking in for work or going to school. From leisure to quick decisions to long-term planning. The science that studies the nature of human action is the science of praxeology. This science is vital to other sciences, such as economics and sociology. It also plays a role, one way or another, in other fields of studies, such as history, ethics, psychology, and epistemology. It is therefore important to have a correct understanding of a proper theory of praxeology in order for any following deductions into other fields of study to not be riddled with flaws, fallacies, and falsehoods. For those who study, are interested in, or who teaches Austrian economics, I think you should stay and watch, because you might hold a falsehood in praxeology that could be holding you back. So, the question I ask is, do we always act in our self-interest? Do we always act selfishly? Ludwig von Mises, the great Austrian economist, once said in his magnum opus, Human Action, on page 242 that, quote, "What a man does is always aimed at an improvement of his own state of satisfaction." In this sense, and in no other, we are free to use the term selfishness and to emphasize that action is necessarily always selfish. Even an action directly aiming at the improvement of other people's conditions is selfish. The actor considers it as more satisfactory for himself to make other people eat than to eat himself. His uneasiness is caused by the awareness of the fact that other people are in want." Unquote. Now, unfortunately, Mises commits a fallacy here. He equates that action is necessarily motivated by some sort of interest the actor values to obtain, with this interest being necessarily a self-interest. We have to separate what is a selfish interest and what is a selfless interest. Meaning, who is the beneficiary here? Is the actor who forgoes eating in exchange for others to eat the beneficiary here? Well, that depends on context. If the context here is that he forgoes eating now for some sort of expected reward later, such he may have exchanged his opportunity to alleviate hunger for a gaining friends and allies via exchanging those means to them, then we can see this as a selfish act. But if the context was rather a motivation out of a felt duty to others, meaning he was not expecting a reward in return, then there is no way this action can be called selfish. Is such a selfless action possible? Well, we know that action is necessarily motivated out of the actor's belief that his current state of affairs should be exchanged for a expected more satisfactory state of affairs. And the belief that this action is the best action he could take for the best state of affairs out of all the possible actions he could have conceived and that he could have employed. It is true acting man is looking to alleviate his felt dissatisfaction about his current state of affairs, but this does not mean that he necessarily believes the best way to realize a more satisfactory state of affairs is by being the beneficiary of the action. You could say this action is stupid, and I would agree. I am, after all, an ethical egoist myself. However, that does not mean I am a psychological egoist, which is the position that Mises held. Nor does it mean that actions that are stupid, dumb, idiotic, or irrational are impossible. If so, action would be perfect. We would automatically act without failure at succeeding in realizing our actions. But automatic actions would fail to meet the definition of human action as such. Automatic actions cannot be purposeful. To clarify, if action was necessarily always selfish, then there would be no need to worry about altruism as an opposing ethical theory, because then altruism would be impossible. Selfless actions would be impossible. Further, psychological egoism would have to negate free will, because it would have to negate our choice to choose between egoism versus altruism. For us to choose, for us to be the beneficiary of the action, versus for us to not be the beneficiary of the action. If we were barred from that, we would be barred from the choice. And if we were barred from that choice, we would be barred from free will. Of course, if we didn't have free will, then we would not act with purpose. There is something to be gained out of this confusion, besides resolving the fallacy itself. Something to be gained for ethical egoism out of debunking psychological egoism. From the perspective of ethical egoism, to obtain a better state of affairs, man ought to be the beneficiary of the action. Since ethical egoism is the position that one ought act for their own self-interest, one ought be the beneficiary. It affirms the nature of human action itself. That nature being we necessarily act to aim for a better state of affairs. That state of affairs is our state of affairs. We have to be the beneficiary of our actions to live a happy and moral life, to truly succeed in obtaining a better state of affairs. A man who fails at this is simply acting in the belief that in order to have the best state of affairs, he must not be the beneficiary. It is certainly possible for man to be mistaken, to hold contradictory beliefs, as shown before. Further, we cannot properly study economics if we say man is an automatic being, nor any other fields of study under praxeology, nor epistemology and ethics. Now, Mises didn't think that action was automatic, of course, nor do I think a psychological egoist usually thinks we act automatically. The psychological egoists are simply unaware of this contradiction. Insofar Mises qua economist formulates his theories of economics, this shouldn't get in the way. That doesn't mean, however, anyone studying Austrian economics shouldn't correct this falsehood if they hold this falsehood. As Austrian economists are themselves praxeologists, this falsehood does get in the way of psychology, the study of acting man's motivations, which I do believe that psychology is a subscience of praxeology. And as Austrian economists are basically the only real experts on praxeology as far as I know, they need to represent the other branches of praxeology in order to save those other branches, just like how the original Austrian economists saved economics. I don't know what is the status of praxeology being recognized in the science of psychology, but it's already bad enough in the economics community. It's only the Austrian economists keeping that science alive in economics, so I can only imagine how dead, or never alive to begin with, it is in the science of psychology. Mises qua psychologist here makes a grave mistake, even though I can't tell you what such a mistake would exactly lead to because I haven't studied psychology yet. Perhaps any psychologist could tell me in the comments down below. I can tell you it won't be good. Further, such a psychological doctrine kills any need for man to have an ethic. Why ask if we should act selfishly or selflessly when we would necessarily act selfishly? It leads to moral nihilism. Oh boy, you made it to the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Mises, I still love you. No hard feelings. Bye-bye.